Shalawam and welcome back. This is still part 9. This is part 9 continued. I'm having some issues with my computer and my app, so they're not working well and they're not going to get any better, but this is the best I can do. Okay, so let's move on with Revelation chapter 12, verse 13. We're going to take a look at these verses because they're vitally important to see that somehow they're out of sync with each other, with the timeline. And when the dragon saw that he was cast onto the earth, this is verse 13, we know that this is the war in heaven that took place with Mayakaal, who is the archangel Michael, and his angels. He fought against this Satan and his angels, which we know is Gadriel and his fallen angels, and were cast out of second heaven. All right. So we know when we look at verse 4 that his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. This is to show us that the angels, there were some angels that fell. They fell from their places in heaven, and some descended upon the earth and decided to take wives and make children with these earthly wives. And we have what they're called, and we have what they're called Nephilim, the Nephilim children, half human, half angel, hybrids. All right. So this number 4 is their fall from their positions in the high heavens. And now we'll see in verse 13 of the same chapter that Gadriel and the angels, the fallen angels, and the other Satans, they were now cast down onto the earth out of second heaven because they descended from the high heavens into second heaven. That's where they were dwelling. Now they're cast out of heaven completely. They're never to be able to enter into the heavens ever again. This is their last showdown now. All right. So now he is seeking to persecute the woman which brought forth the man child. I'm going to explain that in the next slide. All right. Now, when you look at verse 14 goes hand in hand with verse 6 about the woman fleeing into the wilderness. How many times did she flee? Once. She will be fleeing once. All right. And we can't say that the first time was in 70 AD when our forefathers fled into Africa, because, first of all, the timeline, it was a lot longer. It was longer than 3.5 years that our forefathers were there. And she wasn't fed. She wasn't nourished there. Our forefathers were not nourished. No, they were taken captives and led away as slaves. All right. So you cannot attribute verse 6 to the southern kingdom fleeing into Africa. We went there for safety, but we didn't get it. All right. So verse 6 and verse 14, they go hand in hand together. And now we have verse 15 and verse 16 talking about the serpent casting out of his mouth water like a flood. I'm going to explain that in the next slide as well. So 15 and 16, they don't belong here. Once you understand what these two verses are indicating to us. All right. And then verse 17, well, that is the last event that will take place. It's in its right place. It will be simpler to make the correct timeline of these events, which will make this prophecy more cohesive and understandable. So when we look at point number 1, the woman who is the southern kingdom is seen about to give birth to the man-child. So this is history. All right, and it was the time of Yawachanan, our Savior's birth. So that's history. Even for Yawachanan, it was history. All right, so let's move on now to point number 2. Now, where it says point number 1, the computer does its own thing. The dragon, who is Satan, which possessed the Roman Empire. Okay, the dragon it is Satan who possessed the Roman Empire. We know that from previous studies that we've done in this series and in other studies. All right? And we know who this Satan is. This Satan is none other than Gadriel. He's the one that is calling the shots for these, especially this Roman Empire and the Roman-like empires after it. Except for the last beast empire. He is going to be ousted from the seventh beast empire, and then another will take his place in beast empire number 8, and that was in the previous study. All right? But all along the line, all along the way, all throughout the generations, when we saw this dragon from all the way back from Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's dreams and visions, Yawachanan now, we're seeing this common thread of this dragon, all right, who is possessing this Roman empire and the Roman-like empires after it, except for the last one. Excuse me. So Herod was appointed king of Judea by the Roman Senate. Thus, he was acting on behalf of this Satan, who is the dragon, and also the Roman Empire. You think he can do anything without the Roman Empire say, yes, go ahead and do this? And this is when he sought to kill the child. Why did he try to kill the child? Because he heard about the prophecy that this child to be born, because they saw the stars, right? They saw the star. And the people knew what that star represents based on the prophecy given, that there's a king that was going to be born. Once that star was seen, the king was born. A king who would come and take over King Herod's position. And, being insecure that he wanted to destroy the child before it grew up to be a man to come and take away his kingdom. But what he didn't understand is that it wasn't the natural kingdom that the child came this first time to establish. He came to establish his spiritual kingdom by bringing a way back for his people to enter into the true kingdom of Allah. The second time when he comes back as king, he's coming back for the earthly kingdom. He's coming back to establish his own earthly kingdom. All right? It was King Herod who hatched the plan by using the wise men to help locate Hamashiach when he was a child. And you know that didn't work. Now let's move on to point number 3. Who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, helps us to identify who this man-child was. So if you're curious and to think, well, this man-child represents the church, wrong. The church has never been shown to be given a rod of iron. There's only one person who's given the rod of iron. Yes, we can maybe go back to Revelation, I believe in chapter 3, or either chapter 2 or chapter 3, when one of the assemblies, they're given the rod of iron because they're going to rule. When they overcome, they're given the rod of iron to rule like kings upon the earth. We all will have that rod of iron. It's a rod, a scepter of iron that shows power, right? Great power. But it is given from Hamashiach to his people who overcome. So it is his rod of iron. Okay? So this is his attribute seen in the scriptures. Point number 4, caught up unto Allah and to his throne. Where in the scriptures it talks about the church being caught up to Allah and to his throne. This is speaking of Hamashiach. He came from heaven and he is going to return to heaven where he belongs. Has nothing to do with the church. None of this has anything to do with the church. That word church was put in there to mislead people. Many people are misled because of this word. So let's carry on. So caught up onto Allah to his throne helps us with the timeline to know that this was the timing of Yahawasha's death and resurrection. Okay? So already we see points 3 and 4 is helping us to identify this man-child. Now this is where the information gets convoluted with the events. The woman fleeing into the wilderness in verse 6 seems premature, meaning that this verse is out of order. Rather, it should be verses 15 and 16 in that position. Why these two verses? Because water as a flood is indicative of people, as we have seen many times before, but there are waters which indicate peoples and tongues and nations. So when you see waters plural, it's sometimes or many of the times symbolic of peoples and tongues and nations, okay? While water singular is speaking of a particular group of people who sought to destroy the southern kingdom. So that's what the flood was supposed to do, destroy the southern kingdom. Let's read on. And this is none other than the Roman Empire. Remember, the serpent is the same dragon, and the dragon possessed the empire called the Roman Empire. So this is the Roman Empire backed by the same dragon who in 70 AD mercilessly tried to destroy our forefathers until they fled to Africa. This is not the woman fleeing, as the time for her is way shorter. So if we calculate what Yawachanan said, 7 years in the wilderness as compared to hundreds of years in Africa. And then the point that I said before, she wasn't nurtured there. No, from this it got worse for her. It got worse for our forefathers because they were taken as slaves and treated like brutes, treated like animals, worse than animals. So it wasn't a time for her to hide from the serpent or the dragon. No, there was no hiding because she was captured. But what took place after that, meaning the southern kingdom fleeing to Africa, was the enslavement of our people by the same evil people, although not calling themselves Romans. But they were led by the same dragon to do this thing known as the transatlantic slave trade. This is what we need to take home. All right? Look and see who it was that took our people, the Europeans. All part of the Roman Empire by this time. Okay. The earth swallowing up the flood were people who called for the slave trade to be abolished, and this started from 1806 all the way through to the 1860s. Otherwise, our people would have been wiped off the face of this earth with this evil slave trade. Once our forefathers were set free, they were able to multiply our numbers once again and scattered farther afield. And today we are called the hidden ones in prophecy. Now, if you go back to my earlier studies that I've done, even in the book of Revelation, this understanding was only given to me recently. All right? This understanding about the flood was only recently given to me compared to what I said more than a year ago when I did the book of Revelation. All right? This is how Alahayam works. He gives us enough for the day, and then he continues to build on what he starts to give us. And that's what I'm saying. You start with a solid foundation of truth, and then he starts building from there. And even though what I said before, because I spoke about something that is coming, all right, like a war, something of some sort of persecution that is coming, but at the same time, you have to understand that we are still living under great persecution here in these lands that we're living in. Some places worse than others. because it is the same evil entity that is working through all these people that hate us. Look at how many people, how many of our people have been brutalized. All right? For what? Because of the color of their skin. Look at what they call us. Look at how they treat us. All right? So the brutality has not gone away. It's just that it's a little bit more subtle than in the days of slavery. Okay? All right. Let's go on to point number 5. The war occurred in heaven, where the Satans and the fallen angels were cast out of second heaven onto the earth. So after, now this is little bit, these snippets of history. So now even this part here, point number 5, has happened in 2019. That is about 6 years ago. And this occurred in 2019 when the grand hoax was introduced to the world. That time when the world was locked down. That's when the hoax was rolled out. Why? Because the devils were cast down to the earth. The devils and their angels were cast down to the earth, out of second heaven. Now they can do their worst. And notice that things are escalating quicker and quicker than you can even blink. You turn on your devices tomorrow, and you hear about the next evil event that they are rolling out. They're not stopping because they know this is their last showdown. All right, let's read on. This scene will help us to understand just how old this dragon is and what it has been symbolic of throughout the ages, based on the facts provided. So we see the evidence of this evil dragon, this wicked devil called Gadriel, all the way back from the Roman Empire all the way through to Beast Empire number 7. Even though it split its empire to have that religious entity, which we will talk about in another study, we see that this evil entity, the political aspect of it, is still running the show. All right. What is due, this is point number 6 now, what is due to occur next will be the regathering of the southern kingdom. The woman fleeing into the wilderness, into her place where she is kept from the serpent, from the dragon. That hasn't happened yet. And this is where she's going to be safe, out of the reach of the devil and his angels and his agents, his earthly agents, even the unclean spirits. None of them can touch us once we are taken off this earth. And there we will be nourished for 2 sets of 3.5 years, which will equal 7 years. This fleeing with wings will be a supernatural and divine escape from the earth, as spoken to us by Hamashiach. He already told us how we're going to get off the earth. Let's go to Matthew chapter 24, verse 30. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Does that sound like a natural fleeing? No, it sounds like he's sending his angels with his chariots, just like he sent his chariots for Elijah, who is Elijah, and Hanawak, who is Enoch. He's going to take us off this earth because there's no place on this earth where we can be hidden and prosper. All right, so he's going to take us off the earth into third heaven where the Garden of Eden is, and that's where we're going to hide out. In fact, we're not hiding out, we're just going to live for 7 years until it's time to return to the earth with Hamashiach and to rule with him and the other 9.5 tribes upon the earth. This will be the supernatural way in which the southern kingdom will be leaving this earth, fleeing from the serpent. And this fleeing from the serpent will be permanent. But our place in heaven will be temporary. We're only there for a short period of time, as we will be returning to the earth with our Malach HaMashiach. Let's move on now to the final point, point number 7. After we're taken off the earth, the devil will be wroth, as he knows now that we will be forever out of his reach. He's angry because he can't touch us. Can't touch us, can't see us, can't hear us, can't do anything to us. We're gone forever out of his sight, out of his reach. So that's why he's going to be angry. So he turns his attention to the northern kingdom, who will be awakened at this time, as this will be their time of martyrdom, seal number 5. So the seed of the woman is not speaking of her offspring, it's speaking of her family, which will be the northern kingdom. The devils will wage war against the northern kingdom and even prevail against them until the great earthquake, seal number 6. And we're going to look at that in another study. All right. These are the events, past, present, and future. But these events are now able to be read more cohesively as we understand the correct timeline. So I've put them in points number 1 all the way through to number 7 so that you can see the rational, cohesive, correct order of this timeline. All right? Currently, because the righteous remnant of the southern kingdom is scattered and hidden, the devils do not know where to begin to look for us. It is for this reason why they're using tactics to flush us out, telling us lies about going into the second Exodus in ships, to go to Africa, all in grave error, which will mean the loss of many lives, as many of our brethren are believing this. There are many of our brethren that believe that we are going to leave the lands of our captivity in ships, luxury liners, to go to South Africa, then to leave there to go into the Exodus. Doesn't make any sense. None of that makes any sense. Especially knowing that the northern kingdom is leaving Africa to go into our land, which is not in Africa. But there's a reason why many of our brethren are going to believe the lies, because they are not in connection. They're not connected to Rawach HaQadash. They're not receiving revelation from him. And if they're not receiving revelation from him, they're not being fed. And the only way we can get the true bread from heaven is through him. And so they're seeking answers and direction from these false prophets and false teachers. And they're happily going along with them. Okay, let's read on. We are to heed only what is written in the word of Allah Hayam in the form of prophecies. And if there are doctrines being taught that do not reflect or line up with what he said in his word, then we are to turn away from those who are teaching such lies and deception. But if you are ignorant of the truth, then you cannot recognize lies and deception when it's in your face. Allah Hayam will continue to use these false leaders and false prophets to prove us. That's what he said. He said in his word, he allowed the false prophets even to show a sign or a wonder to prove who really believes in him, who really loves him, revealing who truly love him and are willing to walk up obediently according to his word. This is why he permits these devils to do their deception and to spread their lies. Because you can only come under a liar if you're ignorant of the truth. If you know the truth, you're set free from the bondage of sin and the bondage of lies. And you can stand up and say, I don't believe that. That's not what the word says. And you can walk away from that person. But if you're ignorant now, if you're in darkness, and you're living like a Gentile thinking that you're one of the brethren or sisters, you're going to keep following these false teachers and these false prophets and prophetesses and false apostles. And there are many of them out there. Many. Many. There's hardly anyone out there telling the truth anymore. Hardly. All because they follow pagan gods. You see, if you start wrong, you're going to end up wrong. And everything that you build up from there is going to be wrong. All right, let's end with the blessing for Yashwa'al, taken from Baal Madabar chapter 6, verses 24 to 26. That's Baal Madabar chapter 6, verses 24 to 26. Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 to 26. Yebarakak Yahweh wa Yashamarak. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. Ya'ar Yahweh panayo alayak wa yachanak. May Yahweh cause his face to shine upon you and have favor upon you. Yasha'a Yahweh panayo alayak wa yasham lak Shalawam. May Yahweh lift up his face upon you and give you peace. And now we're going to recite the command we were instructed to recite when we lie down, when we get up, when we go out, and when we come in, taken from the Barayam chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. That's Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. Shama'o Yashwa'al Yahweh Allah Hayana Yahweh Achad wa Achabath Af Yahweh Allah Hayak Bakal Babak Bakal Napashat Bakal Ma'adak. Hear, O Yashwa'al, Yahweh our Allah Hayam is one Yahweh, and you shall love Yahweh with all your heart, and you shall love Yahweh your Allah Hayam with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And with that, I will say, Shalawam, Shalawam, all praises to the Most High, Abba Yah.